Hello everyone, my name is Narasha Moffett and my 2020 presentation is on Mr. Edward Franklin Frazier. He was an advocate for social justice, administrator, author, and social work educator. He is also associated with both the Atlanta School of Social Work and Howard's University Department of Sociology and School of Social Work. Mr. Fraser was an activist, researcher, and administrator who contributed significantly to the social work profession. He was outspoken and sometimes militant activist for social justice. Fraser was the first African American president of the American Sociological Society. Mr. Fraser was born on September 24, 1894. He was one of five children to James H. Fraser, a bank messenger, and Mary Clark Fraser, a housewife. He grew up in a working class family. Mr. Fraser was educated in the segregated Baltimore school system before attending classes at Howard University in Washington, D.C. Mr. Fraser graduated Howard University with honors in 1916. He was a top scholar pursuing Latin, Greek, German, and mathematics. He participated in extracurricular activities, drama, political science, National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, which is also known as the NAACP, and Intercollegiate Socialist Society. He also served as class president in 1915 and 1916. Mr. Fraser earned his master's degree in 1920 at Clark University. He wrote a thesis which was The New Currents of Thought Among the Colored People of America. He also began to study sociology and also had some interest in the African American history and culture. In 1920 to 1921, he spent some time as Russell Sage Foundation Fellow at New York School of Social Work at Columbia University. Mr. Fraser began his career at Monroe House College in Atlanta, Georgia, as an instructor. He established what is known in the 21st century as the Atlanta University School of Social Work, which he was the director. In 1916 to 1917, Mr. Fraser began teaching mathematics at Tuskegee University. At St. Paul's Normal and Industrial School in Lawrenceville, Virginia, he was teaching English and history from 1917 to 1918, French and mathematics at Baltimore High in 1918 to 1919. In Fraser's view, professional social work included speaking out on major issues of the day rather than going along with the status quo. His social work activism went hand in hand with his activism and contributions to the Black movement in the 1920s. He opposed U.S. participation in World War I because he felt it was hypocritical given the racial discrimination in the United States, and he was also arrested for protesting the movie Birth of a Nation. Mr. Fraser was outspoken and militant in his denunciation of racism and used his research and academic writing skill to call attention to the practices of racism in the United States. He wrote an article, The Pathology of Race Prejudice, in 1927, where he characterized racism as pathology. This bold statement by an African American man was neither appreciated nor welcome in the South and gained so much publicity that Fraser and his family began receiving threats and were forced to leave Atlanta. After being forced to move from Atlanta, Mr. Frazier returned to Howard University, where he taught from 1934 to 1962. During the time teaching at Howard University, he published a book called Race Contracts and the Social Structure, which was published in 1948. At his time at Howard University, he founded and led the DC chapter of American Sociological Association, and in 1948 he was elected as the first Black president. After being recognized as the first Black president of the American Sociological Association, he began to become recognized by a lot of people. He was established as the leading American scholar on the Black family and recognized as the leading theorist on the dynamics of social change and social relations. In 1941, Mr. Frazier traveled to Brazil, where he embarked on a year-long study of family in Brazil supported by Gangalion Fellowship. Bourgeoisie Noire, published in 1955, is a translation of Black Bourgeoisie, published in 1957. This book brought the shock of self-revelation to the middle-class Blacks in America. Its origin and development accentuating its behavior, attitudes, and values during the 1940s and 1950s. Another one of his work is The Free Negro Family, a study of family origins before the Civil War, published in Nashville by Fisk University in 1932. The Negro Family in the United States was published by the University of Chicago Press in 1939. The Negro Family in Chicago was published by the University of Chicago Press in 1932. Negro Youth at the Cross Paths, Their Personality Development in the Middle States speaks about experiences of Negro boys and girls living in Washington, D.C. and Louisville, Kentucky, which was published in 1940. The Negro Family in Bahia was published in 1942 in Brazil. This slide displays quotes by Mr. Frazier. Mr. Frazier died at age 68 in Washington, D.C. He holds an historic place among African Americans for his significant contributions. The life and work of Mr. Frazier brought him into conflict with whites and other Black alikes. Not content to accept the things as they were, he worked tirelessly to bring racist practices into the light and change the circumstances for African Americans in the United States. He accomplished this through his own activism, his written works, and by educating a new generation of social workers. His obituary was published in the American Sociological Review. This slide is my list of references where I got my information from.